Call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron accept the agenda for December 2nd, 2019 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we shall move on. Public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody in the public to speak. Seeing no hands, we'll continue on. Consent agenda. That the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agendas 5.1.1. And further, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 and 5.3.2 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Rick seconding. Anyone like to speak out about anything?
Every time I look at you, that means yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Great. It's 514, the minutes to the Bridge Dam Committee.
Mhm.
I read them with glowing interest every time. And I find there's not enough detail, like when delegates come in, specialists come in, it just seems to be, move on to the next one. And I do realize that it's maybe presented somewhere in YouTube, somewhere else, but I kind of thought it still should be, some of the points should be still available right at the minute section. Then the other thing, it's just a concern. When the final report is written, how will it be written? Like, who does the writing? You know, Kevin, how? I know, but how's it gonna, what's the process gonna be?
Well, there is a work plan to go by. It's posted in the minutes, and then the information from the House and Mills as to how the entire process works through. That work plan will, we have no idea what the initial information is going to be in it, because we haven't struck that yet, but I'm not sure what information you're looking for.
So any,
If I could just, Chris, I'm just wondering if, first of all, if we could maybe have one of the staff members speak to this too, as far as not enough information, how that would work, and if you have any thoughts on how this is going to come. I totally agree with what Kevin just said, but just the information part, Kevin, is not.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The challenge has been that thus far the delegates have, the majority of them have been speaking at a very highly technical level. So it has been difficult to actually capture the intent. We can certainly try to get some more information in there, but we just have to be very careful in doing it that nothing gets lost in translation or worse yet gets misinterpreted. That's the reason you're seeing a fairly thin document. Just basically you're trying to paraphrase KGS or MBCA or that sort of thing. So, but we can certainly see if we can.
or route it to a place where we can find it easily?
I think I'm gonna let Carson speak to that now. I think he may have that answer.
So just in regard to the minutes, so as Sean alluded to, it's very technical information at that time, and the other piece to it is that the committee, it's also a lot of comments from the committee members, as it's this information gathering piece, and under the Municipal Act, your minutes are supposed to be without note or comment, so that's why you're seeing, the high level, but as the committee starts to progress and they'll go through the analysis stage, and when they start to narrow down their options, you'll start to see more of what the committee actually decided. But right now, as Councillor Falconer and Sean have both alluded to, the minutes have largely been information gathering, and that would also be contained on the website through, like, we post all our videos of the committee meetings, and so if council wants those links, we could share where to find those as well.
It'll make it easy.
Yep.
Thanks.
What, Chris? If you had more, I just wanted to make sure we got the answer.
Just so it's on the record too, is, so right now, all our council and committee meeting videos are on our website under the tab New and Noteworthy. So if you go to Residents and then New and Noteworthy, they'll all be there and they're all in the order of the meetings that we've had. So our newest meetings will be at the very top.
Anything else, Chris? Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 5.1.1, minutes of the regular sorry. Gonna go to public meetings, hearings, and agendas. We don't have any. Number 7 is reports. 7.1, the clerk's department. 7.1.1, I'm just gonna read the motion and have Carson speak to it. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the clerk dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding the Community Safety and Wellbeing CSWB Plan, update and appointments for information purposes. And further, the council hereby appoints the Chief of the Police Services Board, the clerk, and the assistant to the CAO to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. And further, that the bylaw 25-2019 committee appointment bylaw be amended to reflect these appointments. I am not going to ask for a move or a seconder until we have a discussion in case somebody wants to change that. So I'm gonna open it up to the floor. Yes, please, Carson, speak to that first.
Thank you, Your Worship. So under Bill 175, which is the Safer Ontario Act, every municipality is required to adopt a community safety and well-being plan. And so the date of adoption of these plans is January 1st, 2021. And so these plans are basically supposed to identify your priority risks within your community, identify strategies to reduce those risks, and then set measurable outcomes of how those, to see whether the strategies you're using are effective or not. So basically, in order to lead the development of these plans, in Huron County municipalities, a working group's been established, consisting of clerks and administration staff, and then also police service board representatives. And so from North Huron, it's been myself as the clerk, Mandy, who's the assistant to the CAO, and then Trevor as the chair of the police services board have been on this working group. And so basically this working group is tasked with developing a terms of reference for the advisory committee, a data sharing agreement to the various agencies who we need the data from, a work plan and a timeline for to make sure we complete the community safety and wellbeing plan by the January 2021 deadline. And then also what that advisory committee composition is going to look like, what the appropriate budget allocation would be to complete the plan, and then also a communication strategy so the community is aware of the development of this plan as well. And so this group, basically the goal is to create a generic template that can then be customized for each community, so to customize it to the specific risk factors that are really prevalent in the community. So for example, based on the data, it might show that North Huron really needs to place a focus on mental health or drug addiction, or there's, based on whatever risks the data identifies would be where our focus would be. And basically the working group is to establishing a generic plan that we can customize after that. So the second piece to this report is the advisory committee. And so under the legislation, every community safety and well-being plan that's prepared, an advisory committee is required to be established as well. And so this advisory committee, it has to include entities like your local health integration networks, educational services, community and social services, community social services to children and youth, custodial services to children and youth, and then also a municipal council member or municipal employee, and a representative from the police services board. And so basically this advisory, in the development of the plan, the advisory committee is consulted as well as members of the public and then community organizations. So from our last joint working group meeting, we established what the advisory committee is going to look like. And so for North Huron's piece to that joint advisory committee, we're required to appoint one council/police board member, and then one staff member to the advisory committee. And so, seeing as Deputy Reeve Sipe has served on the working group as the chair of the Police Services Board, it's recommended that he continue to serve on the advisory committee. And then myself, as I'm leading the plan for North Huron, it'd be prudent that I sit on that advisory committee as well. And then I also have that the assistant to the CAO, Mandy, also continue to assist myself in the development of that plan for North Huron and attend if the advisory committee meetings if I'm ever unable.
Thank you, Carson. So I'm gonna open it up to the floor for questions, comments, or concerns. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Peter, Carson. Just a clarification. Who is the committee advising to? Who's that information about?
To the working group in the development of the plan.
And the working group is in?
The working, so it's a joint working group, consisting of the detachment commander, and Trevor, if you want to jump in at all, if I'm missing anyone in the advisory committee. But basically it's been the admin staff and police board representatives, but then the advisory committee, it's going to pull in all those different organizations as well. So not just your council and staff, it's going to be your local health networks, it's going to be your school boards, it's going to be not-for-profit places like United Way, so all those agencies as well.
So the intention of this advisory, sorry, Carson, so the intention of this advisory group is all the councils within the Huron County are going to be required to have the same thing. So why would each council from Huron County go and ask the United Way for all different information? When one advisory group could ask them for a whole ton of information, and then the North Huron could segregate what information they want to get out of that data. Morris Turnberry could take their data to what they want, and vice versa. The caveat to that is the legislation requires certain things to be on the advisory committee. So a chair of a police services board is a requirement. Well, Morris Turnberry and Howick, they don't have one. They don't have a police services board. So part of our hope is that we're gonna share in these resources so that, you know, the detachment commander who is now serving for Huron County and Perth County doesn't have to go through 85 meetings because of all the same information. So that's the intention. The advisory committee is to set the plan which is then adopted by this council. So they're gonna hope to bring all the information as it relates to, and we're gonna get feedback from council and public consultation and a whole bunch of other people to ensure that the plan is exactly what strategically we want the community well-being plan to be, and that we've got strategies and metrics that we can make sure that in a year from now or 2 years from now when the government audits this, we can provide them and show them that we've done all the things necessary as it relates to the working group. So a lot of the working group perspective is to minimize resources, because everybody in the municipality in Huron County has to do a plan. It doesn't have to be the same plan, because Goderich is gonna be different from their strategies in North Huron. So it's just a matter of gaining that usage data from all these Canadian Mental Health, United Way, the hospitals, like the school boards, those types of things, so that we can get all the information, send it to them once, and then have them send it back, and then the advisory committee can take the information and dissect it and send it to the boards and the advisory committees of each municipality. That's the intention.
So just clarification for myself, it's my understanding that Trevor's on the board and there's room or opportunity for one more counselor if they would like to help out at this stage, or
So
Trevor, you're fulfilling that duty, just so we're clear.
Yeah, so technically I am both. I am a member of council, but I am also the chair of the police services board. The reason why I'm there, in all honesty, is the chair of the police services board.
Yeah.
Because that then takes away some of the momentum if the detachment commander can't be there for whatever reason or whatever the case may be, and the fact that we have municipalities that don't have police service boards,
Yeah.
we can provide them opportunity and support to Morris Turnberry and Howick to say, you know, you're gonna have a hard time fulfilling the requirements of this legislation because you don't have this. We can help you with that as well as get you the information, the data that you need. So at the end of the day, council could have, absolutely have another member of council on it. It just from a resource perspective didn't seem that necessary in the fact that I'm going there as a police services board rep anyways, and I can wear both hats. It's not so that I don't have to.
Yeah, okay, no, go ahead, Darcy.
Yeah, so through you, your worship, so the other piece too is, so it's very, as Deputy Reed Sykes has alluded to, it's very data driven. So a lot of the data that's gonna be extracted is based on your crime statistics, which is why they have that police board concept, right? So all the data that the OPP is collecting, that the police board sees all the time and is familiar with, that's a large piece of the data that's going to form this plan.
And I understand that, so that's where Trevor comes in, and we're grateful for you, Trevor, to take the time to do that, because I know how busy your schedule is already. But it is opened up. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Reed Bailey, okay, it's data, just forgive me, but then what? Like, we can be data rich, but where's it gonna go, and how's it gonna improve society?
So read through, so Chris, what happens is, from that data, strategies in order to improve that data are talked about at this advisory committee. So let's talk about mental health, for example.
Yeah.
Mental health is a big item in the media, in the population today. So there are statistics with Canadian mental health and the OPP that indicate all those things that relates to mental health. What's gonna happen is that information is going to get looked at, and then our advisory group is gonna look at, you know, maybe Goderich and North Huron have the same plan as a strategy as to reduce potential issues with mental health and support for our public in our mental health capacity. That data is then taken and said, okay, based on this strategy, what is our mental health, what is that data gonna look like if we're successful? So it's like a benchmark. So you take the data that you have today, use it as a benchmark, and how you take the strategy, whether it be time, resources, money, whatever you're gonna put into the strategy in order to either reduce mental health issues within your community or somehow change or better provide services for mental health, whatever that looks like. This plan is supposed to then be able to be looked upon in a year or two with that benchmark and said, your strategy said you were going to do this, and it was going to be measured to reduce something. And if it doesn't, well, then it's not gonna be bad or good, it's gonna be a way for us to measure so that you can change the strategy or change the things so that it's always a working document. It's never gonna sit on the shelf and never be used. It's going to be required to be always updated by the province. I don't know about the legislation, Carson, whether it's annually or 3 years, I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's the intention. That is that this data is be used as a benchmark because we have it. Now what are we gonna do to make it better? What are we gonna?
Does it help the certain groups redirect themselves to concentrate here or here? Whether it's health services or police or whatever?
And again, absolutely, when you have this a number of people who are in the same room, the discussion about who's doing what is always going to be a part of the discussion. So, you know, the hospital themselves could be directing a huge amount of resources to mental health. Well, so could the United Way, and so could the police. So the conversation is there something in this task, this focused group, that strategy that says, we're gonna invest some time in collaborating this group to better acclimatize themselves to mental health. Like I'm making things up as I'm talking to walk you through what the intention is. And then at the end of the day, that discussion is going to be had at the end of the year as this council looks at it and says, or at the end of the period says, the strategic plan. Did we do what we were gonna do, and did the metrics get met, or did it fail? And at the end of the day, if they failed, the staff and the working group are gonna have to come back to change those strategies in order to make them succeed.
There will be, it'll come before council from time to time and do progress, right? It'll be like a council report.
Well, absolutely, because it's gonna have to come to council for council input as to what the strategies are, but it's gonna be coming to the public, so the council needs to direct staff as to how that communication plan is gonna go out. And it's gonna have to be, we're gonna have to think outside the box as to how we communicate this to the public, because as you're more than aware, council, in that when we had our strategic planning meeting, we had more counselors and staff there than we did any input. The ministry is requiring us to indicate that we're providing feedback and community action. So we're gonna have to figure out different ways to bring this out and make sure people are aware of it, whether you're going to the library or whatever the case may be. That strategy plan is gonna come here for discussion at council on how we determine what that is.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Anita seconding. Any more questions or comments? Last chance. Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. 7.1.2, taxi bylaw update, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive a report of the clerk dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding the taxi bylaw update for information purposes. And further, the council directs the staff to prepare a bylaw to repeal and replace the current taxi bylaw 24-2009 for December 16, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a mover? Anita, do I have a seconder? I have Chris. Questions or comments? Oh, sorry, Carson, would you like to let us know what's going on with that?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, taxi bylaws are used by municipalities to regulate and govern the owners and drivers of taxi cabs or other vehicles that are used for hire within your municipal boundaries. And so basically at their simplest, regulatory bylaws such as taxi bylaws are used to ensure consistency across the services that are being provided in your municipality. So for example, the taxi bylaw is a tool that municipalities use to ensure that members of the public know what they can expect when they are looking for a transportation service. So in the current taxi bylaw, it was passed in 2009 and is in need of various updates to reflect the best practices that are used across Ontario. And the recommended updates will provide an increased level of consistency, safety, and security for transportation services in North Huron. So 7 types of changes have been made to the taxi bylaw. These changes were developed through research of recently updated municipal taxi bylaws, and specifically the municipalities heavily used in the research were the municipality of West Perth, the town of Goderich, the municipality of North Perth, the town of Amherstburg, and the city of London. So the first change is wording related to fees. So similar to the update that was undertaken earlier this year for the animal control bylaw, so the taxi bylaw has been updated to read throughout it as per North Huron's fees and charges bylaw, as opposed to specifically listing the fees in a schedule within that bylaw, because as council will be aware, we've started to move away from putting fees and charges specifically in the bylaws and putting them in our fees and charges bylaw instead. That way, when there's a time when the fees and charges need to be updated, they can be updated annually through our fees and charges review process, compared to having to update 2 bylaws at any time you want to make an amendment. So basically, due to the fact that 2 bylaws were always required to be updated, no amendments to the taxi licensing fees have been made since it was adopted in 2009. And through research, staff realized that we are in need of some updates. So the proposed amendments, I will present those amendments during Donna's report when we go through the fees and charges bylaw. So the second change is the addition of a tariff of charges and the tariff card. And so as I stated already, basically taxi bylaws are regulatory bylaws that are used to ensure consistency in the services being provided. And so under section 156 of the Municipal Act, Municipalities are granted the authority to pass bylaws which establish rates to be charged for the transportation of passengers. And so what this is often called a tariff of charges. And so North Huron, through our research, we weren't able to find any other municipality that did not include a tariff of charges schedule. And so ours currently doesn't have it, but we couldn't find any others like that. And so we also consulted with the current taxi companies we have in North Huron, and they were completely in favor of having a tariff of charges implemented. And that gives them a set price for what they can charge. And so both taxi companies thought that was a great thing, and it's something they use in the other municipalities that they operate in as well. And so the tariff of charges that staff has developed is contained in Schedule B of the draft bylaw. And so the way we developed that, we did, it's similar to the municipality of North Perth, because both of the taxi companies we currently have in the municipality operate both out of North Huron and North Perth. The third change that you'll see throughout the bylaw is the introduction of other types of transportation vehicles as well, beyond just your simple taxi cab. So we've also added accessible taxi cabs, group transportation vehicles, and limos. And so most taxi cabs these days go beyond regulation of just taxi cabs and now incorporate all types of vehicles that provide your transportation services within your municipality. So accessible taxi cabs, just to provide you with a definition of them, those are taxis that are specifically designed to transport persons with disabilities. Group transportation vehicles, so that's your similar to a taxi cab but larger, so that would include your vans, your minivans are also what's referred to as shuttle buses, and so these are they have a capacity of 6 to 10 people, and then the other one is a limo. So North Huron, we currently don't have anyone providing these types of transportation beyond just your regular taxi cab, but staff found it prudent to incorporate these into the bylaw as well, so that if there was a time where someone was looking to provide this service, one, it's already regulated, and two, you wouldn't have to do an update to the bylaw. And then it also provides us with an inventory of what kinds of taxis we have in our municipality. Since we've separated them out now, we can tell, oh, we have one van being provided, we have 2 accessible taxi cabs in the municipality, and so it's easier for us to inform the public of what we offer. The fourth change is the separation of licensing requirements for owners and for the owner/vehicle license, and then for the driver's license. So currently we license the owners who register the vehicles of the taxi cabs, and then we also register the drivers who would be driving those. And basically the change in this bylaw, we've clearly identified the applications required for each of those types of licenses, and we've also upped the vetting process for those looking to receive the licenses as well, to reduce the liability on the municipality. And so specifically the applications for the driver's license are now contained in Schedule B, and the owner/vehicle license application is in Schedule E. And so now when they apply for a license, it's clear to them what form they use and how they go about the process, which is something that was never reflected before. The fifth change is we've clearly outlined the duties of all parties responsible for carrying out the taxi bylaw. So that includes the licensing officer, which is myself as the clerk, the duties of the township, which is contained in Section 6 of the bylaw, the drivers in Section 12 of the bylaw, and the owners as well in Section 12. And so again, the purpose of this is just to provide more clarity in who's responsible for doing what under the taxi bylaw. The sixth change is to increase accessibility in North Huron. And so we went about the whole bylaw to provide protections to persons with disabilities and also incentivize accessibility. So you'll see in the report, Section 12.1 of the bylaw, we've included protections such as taxi companies not being able to charge a higher fare for persons with disabilities and not charging a fee for the storage of mobility devices that they need. And also to increase accessibility, with our accessible taxi drivers now, since they've been separated out, if anyone is looking to become an accessible taxi cab driver, they have to complete the wheelchair and occupant restraint systems training program. And this is a program that's used by most municipalities who offer accessible taxi cabs, so it's just one of the requirements they have to have. And to incentivize more accessible taxi cabs and accessible taxi cab drivers within the municipality, we're also recommending lesser licensing fees for accessible vehicles and drivers, which I'll speak to more when we go through the fees and charges bylaw. And then the final change is just to improve the clarity of the bylaw. So section 14, I've added the scope of the bylaw, which is that these amendments only apply to the geography of North Huron. A validity and severability clause, which is just a good practice when developing bylaws, which means that if something's ultra virus, which is outside of the municipality's jurisdiction, or if it's not legal under the bylaw, then if part of the bylaw is struck down, the entire bylaw is not struck down, the rest remains binding. And then the other piece there is just the definitions. They've all been, we've added more definitions to provide clarity to the bylaw. Oh, yeah, you actually.
Do we have a mover and seconder? Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
After you're ready to start. Any allocation to fee charging rideshare? In this area, we're just kind of picking up the taxi.
Can you elaborate on rideshare?
Well, just, we've got, Uber, Lyft, that kind of thing, where it's an alternative to the taxi service.
Yeah, so through your worship, so rideshare's not something that's really prevalent around here right now, and if that was something that we would want to look at, it's been handled differently by every municipality, right? Some use it as their complete transportation system, some don't allow it at all, and whether that's a viable response or not, I don't know. But we didn't put much emphasis on that at all, simply because there's no rideshare operating in North Huron right now.
Go ahead, Kevin. Chris, sorry.
Where do the drivers get their wheelchair and occupant restraint training program? Where do they go for that?
I'm pretty sure it's something that you can do online,
Oh, okay.
but I can definitely look into that more and follow up.
Like it's a request, so
Yep.
a requirement rather.
Yep, so we pulled that from a few bylaws, so I can definitely follow up with one of the clerks there to see how they approach that as well.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2, Finance Department, 7.2.1, Fin, Section 357, December 2019. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive a report of the Director of Finance dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding tax refunds under Section 357-1-D-I of the Municipal Act in the amount of $3,476.73. And further, the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves adjustments to the collector's roll as recommended by the Director of Finance in the report dated December 2nd, 2019. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? I have Kevin, I have Paul. Donna, can you speak to this, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Yes, from time to time, we receive applications under Section 357 of the Municipal Act. We have received 2 such applications. They are both the result of demolition of a building, and the property addresses are listed. One is, both of them are, one's a farm building, and then the other one is also on a farm, or pardon me, not on a farm, but it is the same as the other demolition requirement. So these applications were sent to MPAC, and so they have been returned back from MPAC with a recommended assessment adjustment. And the amount of the 2 application totals, as the Reeve stated, $3,476.73. And we do budget for this type of application each year. Our annual budget is $36,400, and to date, including these, we will have refunded $12,567.07. So is there any questions about either of these applications?
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just curious, is it down to the last month now? We just had one more month where people could put in claims?
It's ongoing, they can put the claims in, whenever their building comes down. Normally due to weather, they don't bring
Yeah.
buildings down this time of year, so, but we receive them various times throughout the year.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Trevor.
Just to clarify that, Donna, how far back could they request the adjustment though?
These ones are 18 and 19. I haven't seen them under the impact, they usually don't go back any further than 3 years.
3 years.
Deadline is 3 years.
Other questions, comments, or concerns for Donna? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.2, the water and wastewater financial plan 2019. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding the water and wastewater financial plans for information purposes. And further, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby adopts the water and wastewater financial plans for the 2020-2025 terms as presented. And further, that Council deems the North Huron drinking water systems and the wastewater systems would be financially viable as outlined in the plan. And further, that the Council has considered the financial impacts as part of the adoption of the plans. And further, that Council deems the signing of the bylaws adopting the plan to be a time-sensitive matter and approves an exception to the sections 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 113-2019 to be passed at the December 2nd, 2019 council meeting. Dawn, I'm gonna ask you to speak to that before I ask for a mover seconder.
Yes, thank you, Reed. So, as you're aware, we've been working on the North Huron Water and Wastewater Master Plan for a couple of years now, and BM Ross has been our lead on that project. So included in the water and sewer master plan, there were different components, and Andrew Garland was here presenting to you in September of this year. So two pieces, the rate study, which we've had some, quite a bit of good discussion on our rates, and we needed to have the rates determined before they could complete the financial plan, which is what you have attached in your agenda packages. So as we were talking, the financial plan is a requirement of your drinking water license, and our drinking water license is coming up for renewal on June the 24th, 2020. But your application has to be in 6 months prior to that, so that's December 24th of 2019. So that's why we've been working at this, to try to get the financial plan completed, because Sean has to send it in with his drinking water license renewal. So the regulation for the drinking water, under the Safe Drinking Water, tells you that the financial plan has to be for 6 years, and so we have to adopt it that way. But as council and staff, we had recommended that, especially the rate piece, which is a component of that, we're gonna review that every 5 years, because it only makes sense to reevaluate things in 5 years rather than the 6. I don't know why there's always been a 1-year lag in that legislation for the two different requirements, but that's the way it's been since it was implemented. So we have a number of things to do. The financial plans have to be, once they're adopted here by bylaw, we have to send a copy into, Sean has to send it in with the drinking water license, we have to post it on the website, we have to send it into the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and these financial plans have to be made available at no charge. So as we went through the various components in the plan, there's a lot of information that's outlined that we've discussed on September the 27th, and then it's been summarized and compiled into these two separate plans that were attached to the agenda. So I did just want to note also that this regulation that I'm talking to does refer to your drinking water license, but it is best practice, and because both water and wastewater are so linked, that municipalities, as I said, best practice, adopt both a wastewater plan and a water financial plan at the same time. Because a lot of the same information goes into both plans, and the rates are so linked and such, so. That's kind of a brief synopsis of where we've been and how we got to this point today, and the requirements that we still have to finish off before December 24th in order to be able to complete our submission and our application. So does anybody have any questions?
I think I'm gonna ask for a mover and a seconder first. Chris is gonna move it. Do I have a second? Rick is gonna second. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Trevor.
I have two questions. One, so if we've done a financial plan for water and wastewater, would our budget basically line up identical to this?
It's certainly the guideline for that, for sure. And it won't likely be identical, because as soon as we pass this, next year's budget could be, something could happen for next year. But we definitely line them up as a start.
But 2020 should be like relatively close to this.
Relatively close, yes.
So the other question I have, and more probably for Sean than Donna, but there was a question brought up at, when we were looking at it, when BM Ross was here, that there was some concern about hydro allocation. That in our budget, that the hydro was, we had budgeted significantly more than we were using. What, in this financial plan, did we use what we thought, or did we use what we were budgeting in the, like, did the budget or the financial plan take into consideration our budget for 19, or did it take into consideration what our actuals are planning on to be?
It's it's been adjusted in the 2020, but nothing, there was no discussion in the development of the financial plan. Maybe Donna can build on that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So yes, the 2019 budget is what you'll see was included in the plan. And then the financial plan concentrates on long-term capital in much greater detail than your regular operating costs. But it is 2019, if you look at the different charts in both the plans, it is 2019 budget that is in here.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
Just between the two BM Ross reports, one on the water and one on the wastewater, just wondering if it should be checked that the number of users between the two reports don't add up. One report's up by 69 users.
Well, so not all customers have water, not all customers have sewer and water,
I know.
yeah. So is there something else though?
Well, there's only 33 customers that I know of that don't have both sewer, or don't have both. We used to be able to
In
walk.
Blythe and Wingham together?
But just looking at one number, has the total customers is 17,000, or 1,743, and the other report had 1,674. There's only 33 in Belgrade.
Yeah, these reports don't have Belgrade
Yeah,
included.
that's what I mean, but they
Right.
both have the number of users. I'm just wondering if we have 70 users or don't.
I'm gonna ask,
Just the difference between the
I'm gonna ask-
numbers.
I'll double check it for you.
It's table 31.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Donna to follow up on that.
Yeah.
And also, Donna, if you could.
Yeah.
I believe when I was on council last time, we made a decision that if you had our water, you had to use our sewer and vice versa, and there was no cross-contamination allowed. Could we just check and see if I'm right or wrong on that?
Yeah.
Because if I'm right or wrong on that, you brought a very good point up, Kevin. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next one, 7.2.3, fees and charges. That the council of the township of North Huron hereby receive the 2020 draft fees and charges bylaw for information purposes. And further, that the staff be directed to prepare a bylaw adopting the 2020 fees and charges for the December 16th, 2019 council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, seconder. Chris, Donna, could you speak to this? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. So at this time of year, again, we go through our review of fees and charges as we're working through our budget process. And so it's quite a lengthy document, as you can tell from your attachment there. So I'm going to summarize those as best I can, and also with the help of the department heads who are here. So in Schedule A under administration, the only change there is our zoning certificate, and that is going from $75 to $80. And the purpose of that is Kirk issues those zoning certificates, and what we're trying to do for Kirk and his staff is to provide consistency with Morris Turnberry so that our fees are the same when staff are issuing those licenses. The next one, certificates, pardon me. The next one is animal licenses, and Carson, I don't know, do you want to speak to it?
Sure.
Thank you.
So through your worship, so as you'll see in the report, Donna's report there, so with the first dog, the change we've made is if the dog is spayed or neutered, you'll see an increase in the fee of $5, so from $15 to $20, and if the dog is not spayed or neutered, it's an increase from $30 to $40, so an increase of 10. And so basically the practice that animal license bylaws usually use is your spayed and neutered dogs is half the price of what a non-spayed and neutered dog would be. So similarly, with the second dog, you'll see the same increase from an increase of $5 for a spayed and neutered, and $10 for a non-spayed and neutered. Third and fourth dogs within the municipality, so they're already $40 for a spayed and neutered and $80 for a non-spayed and neutered. And when we were doing research as to what other municipalities were around, that was already quite high, so we didn't feel the need to change that. Pit bulls, no change, and I just want to point out that pit bull licensing is for pit bulls that are grandfathered in, so these are pit bulls that prior to the year of 2005 when they were allowed in Ontario. As that was 14 years ago, this number should be, we should not be really licensing anymore at this point. With the replacement tag, so as Kirk is going to speak to in his dog counter report, the tags we're going to be using are for a 3-year period, but these tags do need to still be renewed every year. But so there's just a larger likelihood that we're going to require replacement tags, so we've added a $10 fee for that, which is common across other municipalities. And then for kennels, animal pound, animals at large, and then the provincial offenses, there was no changes to that.
Thank you, Carson. So on to Schedule C, under building permit fees, there's no changes at this point, but Kirk is going to be bringing a report back to you in early 2020 with proposed building permit rates, and Kirk has to follow a little bit of a different process in that his building permit fees have to be advertised for, I believe, 21 days then, Kirk, is that correct? Yes. So he will be bringing that forward to you early in the new year. The cemetery fees, all of the cemetery fees were increased by CPI, and we're using to October of 2019 CPI at 1.7%. There were no changes to the public works schedules or the license schedules. The planning fees are set by the County of Huron, and they had a 2% increase that they adopted a couple of years ago, and it spans a 5-year term for the County of Huron. The Schedule H for the recreation and facilities, so it is quite a lengthy schedule, and I attached a separate attachment, if you will, to give you out in the column. Most of the fees were increased by CPI, but there could be some of her fees were increased by cost recovery, or some of them in part of their review did not have an increase. So all of those are listed out to the column in that Schedule H attachment. And then I'll move on to the taxi fees, and so again, Carson, if you would like to give comment on the taxi fees.
Thanks, Donna. So, building off the taxi bylaw report, so I'll start with the owner/vehicle fees and then go to the driver's fees because, as I mentioned, we separated those out. So taxi fees, we're increasing the fee for a vehicle from $100 to $120, so a $20 increase. And then for each additional vehicle that is applied for by the company, there's from $50 to $60, so a $10 increase. Accessible taxi cabs, so we're keeping that at $100 to encourage taxi cabs to be more accessible. So if someone's applying for a taxi cab vehicle license, it's $120, where if someone's applying for an accessible taxi cab vehicle license, it's only $100. So we're hoping that that $20 difference will incentivize more accessible taxi cabs within the municipality. And similar, so each additional accessible taxi cab vehicle is going to remain at $50. Group transportation vehicle, we've added a fee of $120, so this is a new vehicle in the municipality, and a van within the municipality is very similar to a taxi cab, so we've kept those both at $120, and then with each additional vehicle being $60 to align with the taxi cab as well. And then for limos, so we've added a fee of $150, and each additional vehicle is $75, and so those numbers were what we pulled from other municipalities that offer or that regulate and license limos as well. So then for driver's fees, we took a similar approach where the taxi cab driver's license, it's an increase of $5 from 25 to 30, and under our current bylaw, the accessible taxi cab driver's license, it was 45. And so we've decreased that $20 to 20, so I'm not entirely sure of what the rationale behind having your accessible taxi cab driver's license be more expensive for, but as the municipality wants to encourage more accessible taxi cab drivers within the municipality, we've lowered that, so it's currently going to be $5 less than just a standard taxi cab driver's license. Group transportation vehicles, similar again to the taxi cab driver's license, so we've added a fee where that'll be $30, and then the limo driver's license, we've added a fee where that'll be $50.
Thank you, Carson. So we'll move on to Schedule J, which is the water and wastewater that we've been speaking about earlier this evening. So the rate of 7.1% increase was previously approved by council, as was the Belgrade water rate moving to full cost recovery in 2020. So those are the rates that we had discussed earlier. And then Schedule K, North Huron Children's Programs, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie for a moment, and she will just go over those changes with you.
So in our restructuring plan, we did submit some suggested rate increases to help offset the cost of restructuring. Also, the rates and fees have not increased in 3 years due to the funding provided by the County of Huron. So it is time to move them up a bit, and we did a comparison to North Perth, to Walkerton, to Clinton, and to Mitchell Childcare, because they have similar sized programs. So we are putting forward for your consideration that the infant costs move from $47.50 to $50, that the toddler increase from 43 to 45, and that the preschool increase from 37 to 40. This also more evenly distributes the costs between the age groups and helps. I think our most lagging group was the preschool. We were one of the lowest around for preschools, and I think we need to step up and get a higher fee for the children in our care. That we do have some half-day rates there, which do include lunch. The thing with half-day rates, when we're so full, we discourage families from using half-days because we don't want to sit with another half-day empty, and that's a luxury we have when we're full. But if we were lower in numbers and enrollment, that was one way we got families into the program, so they were adjusted accordingly too. After school JK, SK increased from $10 to $11. Now that is for one session before, or $11 for after. So it would be $22 for the day if you use both before and after. the school age is the grade 1 and up, and they would move from $9.50 to $10.50. Their percentage of increase is a little higher than, say, some of the other rates up top. But we are extremely full up there, and with the staffing issues, we felt that we could still continue to offer high numbers of care up there, even with higher costs, and that would again help us offset operating costs. We do a 1 hour rate for families, and that encourages them to use us even though it's a very short time period, and some people don't have this kind of rate, but I think it does encourage families to use us because they just need that quick turnaround where they might be done at 3, but school's done at 3 and they can't be there till 3:30. So when we offer this, at least we get the kids into the program and we get something for doing it, so less than 1 hour would increase from, oh no, I'm not sure if that one's right, 9, it is 9 right now, to 11, no. JKSK is 10, sorry, I missed this one. It's my mistake, she asked me to look at this and I missed this one. So the 1 hour rate will move from 9 to 10 and 11 to 10 to 11. So there, this one isn't right here. Less than 1 hour is currently 9 and 10, not 11. And so we'll adjust that, we'll correct it for the next one. All the other lines are correct, I missed that one. Thank you. That's my mistake, sorry. Oh, and we're gonna introduce, sorry, I missed this is on the next page too. I think the time it takes to set up our registrations in our new billing and accounting system, that we will introduce a one-time registration fee of $10 to offset the costs of doing that as well.
Thank you, Valerie. So next is, there are no changes to Schedule F, Fire and Emergency Services. And Schedule M with the Emergency Services Training Center has been intentionally left blank. As Carson was saying earlier, we're doing some cleanup of some other bylaws that refer back to this bylaw, so it's gonna take us a little bit of time so we can remove that schedule. Development charges have increased by CPI at 1.7%, and then the other licensing fees, there are no changes. So our plan is to have these new rates and fees come into effect on January 1st, 2020. So the bylaw that you have in your package is a draft. We have a bit of formatting and tidying up that we want to do. Of course, we'll make the couple of corrections that we've talked about, but we do want to clean up the format a little bit and just kind of have it laid out a little bit nicer for the December 16th council meeting, when that is brought forth for final consideration. So, as I said, all the department heads have been working on these changes and have been incorporating these changes into their budgets. So, I think everyone but Vicki is here this evening, and I have some of her comments. So certainly if you have any questions, we'd be happy to go over them with you now.
I'll open the floor up to questions now, comments or concerns. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I noticed with the accessible van going around picking up people, their cost is going to be the same as if they picked up somebody else and they just hopped in the vehicle?
So do you mean what they can charge?
Yeah,
So that's not in the fees and charges, that's in the tariff of schedules that I was talking about in Schedule
That's
B of the
17.
taxi bylaw, and that sets what they can charge across the municipality. It identifies basically how many kilometers you're going, and that's what you can charge. So that is the same rate of what they can charge for any of our vehicles.
okay, so really it's going to be the same whether it's a accessible vehicle or
Yeah, so you, I think what it works out to is, so if you're beyond North Huron's boundaries, it works out to be like $2 a kilometer, which is basically aligned with what they're charging now. And so whether it's an accessible taxi cab, a limo, a regular taxi cab, or a group transportation vehicle, it's per kilometer, and it doesn't matter what type of vehicle it is. And that's all in Schedule B of the bylaw.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve, Donna, wherever, it would have helped me if, wherever it says no changes, to know what they were.
So they should have been attached, was the bylaw not attached?
I didn't see it for dogs, for instance. I didn't see it.
Yeah, so the whole, pardon me, the whole, let's just go to attachments. So the whole bylaw should be attached there. And sorry if that wasn't clear. So it gives you, if there was no changes, then what's listed on these schedules is what it was previously.
Okay, I don't have figures, I see the draft bylaw.
Yep, so in that draft bylaw, like, it's titled right now on your attachment bylaw number XX-2019.
Oh, sorry, okay. Okay.
So it's a big,
It's
we've
big.
tried it all different ways, and we're open for suggestions. We're working on some templates and such too, but it's such an animal of a thing, and it's, there's so many pages, and to be able to compare it all as staff, we've tried many different things, and as I said, we're still open for suggestions on what would make it easier for you, for sure. But certainly, if you have any questions as you're looking through that, please give Carson or myself a call, and we'll, no, not at all.
Go ahead, Paul.
You, Reeve. For Donna, I noticed, as mentioned last year budget time, for the nursing home out in adjoining township, that it's sort of, they pay 10 grand a year. So will that be rewritten, that was, I think, done 5 years prior? Will that be rewritten?
So you're talking about Brainerd?
Yes.
So, yeah, so they have a calculation that they pay, based on our rates, and so however much our rates go
Yeah,
up,
okay.
then it would be passed on the same, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Trevor.
Just a couple of comments. One on the accessible taxi cab, the conversation of whether our fees are a deterrent or a not of getting an accessible taxi cab. My opinion is that if we're changing the rate from where if it's not an accessible taxi cab, it's going up 100 to 120, but if it is, it stays at 100. The additional cost to an accessible taxi cab, I don't see $20 being a real enhanced relief of whether I'm gonna get a taxi cab that's accessible or not. I don't know that $20 is what's going to deter them from getting one. But I guess that's the comment, that's my comment. I don't see how that would deter them to get one. The cost of getting an accessible taxi cab in my mind is probably a lot more than having a normal taxi cab. So I don't know that $20 is going to impact them at all. And the other comment that I had was that I seen in the bylaw, unless it says new, like for example, the childcare one, the after school less than an hour wasn't in the bylaw. Wasn't on Schedule K at all. So I'm thinking that's not new, that's not a new rate.
Registration fee?
No, not the registration fee, the 1 hour charge that you potentially would charge a family. It's not on Schedule K right now. That's not a new fee, correct?
No.
So it
So
wasn't
it was
on the
missed
fee,
on the-
it was never on the fee Schedule K at all. So if that is, so my concern would be, is if it is on a fee, then it's on the schedule. Because in my mind, if it's not on the schedule and we've said we're gonna charge it, technically we can't charge it. It's not on the schedule.
Public, it should be on the public fees that are listed on our website, but I don't have,
But that schedule should be the exact same
Yeah.
schedule as Schedule K. So if it's not in the bylaw that's passed, in essence, we should not have been charging per se. And that's just a comment to make sure that whatever we put in these bylaws, on these schedules, that's what we're charging, not only that.
Okay, thank you. Carson wanted to speak to the accessibility.
Yeah, so through your worship, so we've had discussions with the taxi companies we currently have, and they have accessible taxi cabs. They've just never felt the need to license those vehicles within North Huron. So we're hoping that this, even if it is a $20 change, it's more of an incentive for them to start to shift around some of their accessible taxi cabs to here, knowing that they'd be paying less per vehicle for that.
Thank you. I've got one for Kirk, maybe it's for Kirk, the development charges. Are we in line, with our development charges, are we in line with similar municipalities around us with the same size or even bigger? Like this?
I can't answer that question directly. I haven't done a study on that to see where we are aligned.
Yeah.
I know BM Ross and Associates are the ones that are typically retained, I think, for North Huron to do that study.
Okay, so, go ahead, Trevor.
So to answer your question, Reed Bailey, with the last time we did last time we had BM Ross do the development charges, the schedule that BM Ross put together for the previous council to update the development charges would have been in line with neighboring municipalities and other municipalities of similar size. The council did not, at that time, implement the entire development charge. They only increased it a certain amount to, with the belief that would be an incentive to develop. So to answer your question, I would suggest we're probably under what most municipalities have for development charges as it relates to comparable municipalities based on what the charges were considered.
Thank you, Trevor. So going over to Donna, then can we bring those fees up to what we're passing right now, so.
So in order to, development charges, it's, you can only do them every 5 years, and so we're up for renewal. We'll be starting to take a look at them January 1st of 2021 because they expire October of 2021. And so the other thing to remember though too is the development charges vary by municipality because they're based on a specific project. And if a municipality doesn't have water and sewer, then they're not gonna have a development charges that incorporates that. So every municipality is different on what they charge development charges on. Now, you're hearing also about this new legislation, and you've sat in on some of those webinars as well. So what's happening in the future is that there's also a component of development charges that's going to be allowed to be collected on soft services, which has not been the case in the past history. So there are definitely some changes coming, but you can't just increase them without having the background study done. Yeah.
So then we'll keep that in mind for when that comes up. I've
Yes.
already suggested that I would like to see it increased or looked at, depending on which side of the board you're on here. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I believe I have a mover, so I'm going to call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay, we're gonna go down to 7.4.1, 2019-51 Housing Dam, Bridge and Dam Committee Funding Request. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive a report of the Director of Public Works dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding a funding request from the Housing Bridge and Dam Committee for information. And further, the staff be authorized to proceed with advertising to reach stakeholders to speak to the Housing Dam and Dam Committee at the January 2020 meeting. Can I get a mover, a seconder? We're gonna have Sean speak to this. I have Kevin moving it, I have Anita seconding it. Sean, do you mind?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So to date, the Housing, Bridge and Dam Committee are progressing well through their work plan. They had established the work plan in the first couple of meetings that they had. So thus far, that's involved reviewing past information and studies that were on file, some of the historic documents. They also, as council's aware, had opportunity to bring in a number of stakeholders. They had NBCA come in, BM Ross sent a representative. We had a drainage expert come in to talk to the committee about drainage implications. They spoke to Brampton Mining, who was heavily involved in discussions surrounding the dam back in the 80s with regards to rehabilitation. And then certainly they spent quite a time talking to KGS, where they had opportunity to get sort of a frontline detailed review of all of the stability assessments and engineering work that had been done. The one thing though that they haven't heard from yet was stakeholders, and that's the term that was used in the work plan. There was quite a bit of discussion at the last meeting surrounding what a stakeholder was, and the committee determined that the definition they were going to work with was that a stakeholder was a person who is affected or believes that they are affected by any decision surrounding the asset. So that being said, the committee expressed a desire to talk to these stakeholders and wanted to make sure that the integrity of the committee itself was upheld. So to properly reach the stakeholders, they've passed the motion asking that council authorize an advertising campaign. They want to make sure that they hear or give anybody who considers themselves to be a stakeholder an opportunity to speak to the committee. That way they feel that they will have heard from the experts, they would have an understanding of the history. This would be an opportunity for them to talk to the community and find out exactly what the desires were moving forward before they get into sort of a decision-making point. That being said, they understand that the request for funding absolutely must come through council. To date, or as council will recall, it was $15,264 allocated for use by the Bridge and Dam Committee to gather this information. Thus far, they've spent $4,948.01, which leaves $10,315.99 remaining. Our estimate is that to do the appropriate amount of advertising, they need about $730. And the feeling is that once they talk to the stakeholders, the committee should be in a position to move to the heavy lifting, the next steps where they start really working through all the information they've gathered and working towards that final decision, that final report that would come to council. So, and that brings us back to the ask here. So the committee is basically looking for authorization to put this call out so that they can bring stakeholders in for the January 2020 meeting.
Kevin, as chairman of that board, did you have anything you wanted to add, or did Sean do a pretty good job?
Yes, I'm trying to do the job. I think anything I would personally add would be beneficial.
Yeah, thank you. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Chris.
Again, I'm sort of leery of the definition of stakeholder. It should just plain and simple be one of the ratepayers, a ratepayer. Like, I don't care about some person that lives in London or Windsor and drives up, crosses the bridge and likes what they see, and it's not there anymore, or whatever. That's irrelevant. It's the people that are paying the taxes. They should be the only stakeholders here.
Thank you. Did you want to, let's see if Sean wants to answer that first, then I'll go to Trevor.
Thank you, Reeve. That was part of the discussion, and they just, as mentioned, there was quite a bit of deliberation surrounding that, and the committee themselves felt that the definition of stakeholder was broader than just the financial. They felt that they wanted to hear from anybody who may be an avid user.
It opens the door for people that do not live in our municipality. I don't like
So the one thing I like the fact that it has the definition. I was also a little leery on that. However, in the sense where, you know, we have neighbors like Morris Turnberry that could be affected depending on whatever the result of the decision is made, so, you know, they don't have any financial stake in it, but if we remove, if the dam is removed or whatever the case may be and stuff is impacted on them, then in essence, they are a stakeholder, because they should have some right to decide on and determine whether we are negatively impacting something of theirs from the decision that we're making. What I would suggest is that we understand that this is only comments. That the individual from London or Brussels or whatever, they can make their comment and they can make their case. My concern would be, and not necessarily my concern, is that those individuals, if there are more of those people commenting than actual financial constituents that are wanting or not wanting this structure, that their comments are not taken in more context than the people who actually are going to be paying for the structure. Now, we've talked about it here, and the REIT has been very clear that there is no money in the municipal budget for this structure. So, at the end of the day, the hope is that some kind of arrangement to pay for this structure, to either to remove it or to keep it, whatever the decision is. But no matter who that is who's making the comment, I think everybody's comment, and rightfully so, should be presented. But then the committee can also take that information and segregate to say, here's how many people we got, and here's the constituents that live in the municipality of North Huron. Here are the other people that have a stakeholder interest in this. Yeah, they don't have a financial impact, but they have a stakeholder interest based on the definition of a stakeholder. And then that can be reported, that can be included in the package that's presented from the work plan to council then to make that decision on how this is really impacting the full scope of the stakeholder. So we know that 200 people came and talked to that dam committee. If 40 of them were constituents and 60 of them were people in not people who are going to pay for it, obviously there's a discussion that has to be had at the council level and probably even the committee level that says, who is really more vested in this? Is it the municipality constituents who want it? Or is it somebody who would, like you say, Chris, likes the look of it or wants to raise the level for some other purpose that we haven't noted of it? So I'm fine with the context as long as the context is presented in the report to council so they understand completely who the stakeholder is and what their comments are.
Kevin?
Through your, just a clarification on it, the people that are coming will be allowed coming through, have to go through the delegation process, same as any other delegation. And there will only be one person speaking for each delegation. And they will be weighed on not having 20 delegations all saying the same thing. They have to submit what they're going to speak about and present it to staff first to be brought to our committee in order to speak. This is not an open call. We're just the funding for the advertising was just to allow that information to go up, that if anyone does want to speak on either side, or any side, that this is the time they can do it to the committee. And they're only speaking to the committee, they're not speaking to the council. They don't have to do that through the committee.
I'll just, go ahead.
I was wondering who's doing the selection of the delegations, is it staff or you or? Because I think there's a lot of staff time going to this committee and I'm a little bit worried about the cost of that.
Well, I don't know one committee that has requested to come forward, so I don't know how many will
There are
come
people
forward.
who will react on this advertisement, like say there are 10 and there are 5 that look like they're doing the same presentation. selecting who's coming or not? Staff is doing it, like Sean, or?
I'll speak to that. So, yes, our concern is that we don't want, hours and hours and hours of staff and committee time going into the same old. The main purpose of having this publicly is because we've heard from all the people that wanna keep it. We wanna hear from the people that don't wanna keep it too. So as we move forward, everyone knows we were honest, upright, and we heard and gave everybody a chance to talk to it. So my understanding at the last meeting was this was the reason. So we publicly say, please come and give your comments. You need to be a stakeholder, as Kevin's pointed out, as Trevor's pointed out, I mean, it's good to have some skin in the game. None of us care about the guy that has a canoe in London and comes down. He ain't paying for anything, he's not gonna, and if he does a canoe here, he can go somewhere else and canoe. We're the people that live here, our neighbors live here, and everybody needs to speak to it. This is our opportunity. So 2 years down the road, or 3 years, or 30 years down the road, you can look back on our council and they can say, everybody had a chance to speak. It was not one-sided. I hope that answers the question. Trevor?
So, just a clarification. So, this is a request, the applicant is to have people come and actually talk to the committee. What happens if they don't want to talk to the committee? Can they submit their comments to the committee? I'm hearing they have to request a delegation. Well, if I'm a ratepayer or a stakeholder, if I believe I'm a stakeholder, and I'm not a very good public speaker, I don't want to communicate it to the committee by a verbal, I should have the right to do it in letter form and provide my information that way. I'm just asking, I don't know. If the intention was to make sure that they came to the committee, my argument is we had, the council had 5 or 6 meetings open discussion about this project, and we haven't heard from those people to talk verbally in favor of that or against it. So my concern is that if you're gonna only get this, if you're only requested to hear from them verbally, my concern is you're probably not gonna hear from them because they've already had their opportunity many a time to ask that. So that's only my comment. I don't know, I'm just that's what I'm hearing now, is that we're only asking them to talk to.
I'm gonna have Carson talk to that, and then Kevin, you're next.
Through your worship, so I can't speak to the discussion that was had on that at the committee level, but from a North Huron staff perspective, we would probably treat it so the advertising would say, we're looking for all your comments, or opportunity for a delegation, and so anyone who provided written comments, we would post those on the committee agenda, just like we do for council meetings when someone writes a letter. So we would keep that same process.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin?
Through your, it's a balancing act. Reason why it's delegations having one person speak. If you open it up to, as you mentioned, for individuals, there are indications that on one side of the conversation, there's 1,000 people that want to speak individually. Well, we're not, at least as the chair, I'm not comfortable with having an open door parading thousands of people through the meeting. It would just turn into a mob mentality, but quickly. So having them speak through a delegation means they have to physically write down what they're going to say and present to us as a committee. And if you're not willing to go that far, then I don't think the effort of listening to individuals come through our committee is warranted. If you want to have a delegation like any other group of delegations with the concerns come through, it's an equal ground that they can speak to one person.
Just to follow up on that, there is nobody that comes before our council that does not tell us what they're going to talk about. They're notified how long they have, and they know the rules. We just don't let anybody come in not knowing what they're gonna talk about. That would not be fair to any staff member or any councilor. You need to know ahead of time so you can prepare yourself for what's gonna happen. Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, yeah, Trevor, you made a good point. When I've been out in the township, there's so many that are opposed. But you look at the ones that want it, they're organized, and it's hard to compete with that. They're well organized. And the ones that are opposed, they all have their reasons, but how do you organize them, a delegation of them? You know, there could be 50 people that are against, and is that one delegation? How do you organize that? It's difficult. I do like the idea of, if that's an impossibility, try and get a few people together, if that can work, but have written comments. If we can allow for that, that will help.
It has to be done.
And even there's people that just blare off, this is what I like or don't like, but they won't write, they won't come in, and it's difficult, but they still will have to pay the bill one way or the other. And it's, how do we get them included?
Well, this is the opportunity for them to do. We can't go beg somebody to come and tell us
No,
their
we
ideas,
can't.
and we cannot listen to coffee shop talk. It has to be presented properly, just as we do when we do our council meetings, properly forward in public. And this is what we're looking for, and this is the reason we're calling out them. This is everybody's opportunity, and it is the proper way to handle it. And I'm gonna cut the conversation off there. I think we've gone around the horse long, or the track long enough. So I'm gonna call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 7.4.2, airport winter maintenance. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive the report of the Director of Public Works dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding winter maintenance for the Richard W. Levan Municipal Airport for information. And further, that the Public Works staff be authorized to discontinue winter control operations associated with the runway at the Richard W. Levan Airport from December 1st to March 31st, 2020 inclusive. Can I get a mover and a seconder? And Sean's gonna talk to this one. I have Anita, I have Paul. Sean, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So, as the report states, we looked at the air traffic that site has seen from 2013 to present. We're averaging between 2 and 6 flights per winter for the facility. In discussion with Public Works crews, we noted that you're looking at least 3 to 4 hours per snow event to maintain the runway itself. In addition to that, there's concern because the runway is illuminated, so it's not just a matter of whipping down one side and back up the other with the plow. After you plow it, you have to open everything up around, with a snow blower, around all of the lights so that you got full visibility. Again, it's 3 to 4 hours worth of work for a very, very limited number of flights. So the suggestion or the recommendation in front of council today is to close the runway. I need to stress that we're not in any way, shape, or form implying that we would shut down the apron as well. So Orange emergency services by helicopter would continue. So the proposal is no fixed wing from December 3rd to March 31st. However, we would maintain status quo in terms of helicopter operation. That way emergency services continue. The site would still be monitored and proper snow removal, not only on the apron, but the parking area, the Apex property that we already plow, as well as the entrance. So that's all we're looking for, is to shut the runway itself down. If council approves, we would have a NOTAM issued, which is a notice only, which would formally stop fixed wing services until such time as it was put back online anymore.
Thank you, Sean. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, we've, there's a question and a concern, I guess. Were any of those 2 or 6 flights during the winter, were any of them emergency landings?
Through you, Your Worship.
Yep.
We only have the numbers as far as
Okay.
fixed wing landings. We don't believe they were, because what we're seeing is that Orange operates by helicopter, but they do, you're right, they do have fixed wing aircraft. I'm not aware of any, but we
Okay.
don't have any.
And the concern was you would issue a notice to airmen, but does Transport Canada, seeing that this is sort of, I don't know, registered airport, does Air Transport Canada have any say as to whether we can shut it for the winter?
No, the NOTAM, through your worship, the NOTAM is the formal required method of doing this. So basically, notice to airmen, as soon as we issue it, any aircraft operator that's submitting a flight plan would be notified of it, because that would be part of their flight plan.
Okay.
as they were
I
gonna-
get you.
So this is a very formal way of documenting it.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion, all in favor? Carries. 7.4.3, this is the 2019-54 authorization to tender request Carling Terrace Road reconstruction. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby received a report of the Director of Public Works dated December 2nd, 2019 regarding a request for authorization to tender for the Carling Terrace Road reconstruction program for information. And further, that the staff be authorized to proceed with the tendering process with a report on the outcome of the, to be presented to council on the January 2020 meeting. At A, I don't think you mean there, one or the other, because it doesn't give me a specific.
I'm sorry, there's, yeah, the January 13th meeting.
We get some time off. Sorry. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. Do I have a seconder? I have Kevin. Questions or comments for Sean? Concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. $7.5, we have no reports from the fire department, which is always a good thing. Building department, here we go, Kurt. 7.6.1, 2020 dog counter report, that the council of the township of North Huron hereby receive a report of the fire building, chief building official dated December 2019 regarding a dog counter for information purposes. And further, that the council of the township of North Huron hereby authorize the chief building official to secure dog counting services to begin in early 2020. And further, that council hereby grants pre-budget approval for this service of a dog counter for 2020. And further, that council supports the best practices of retaining a dog counter services for 3 years. And further, that the direction of the director of the finances to be directed to incorporate pre-budget approval for dog counter services into the 2020 budget. And further, that the director of finance be directed to transfer from reserves any annual animal control services surplus beginning in 2019 for the purposes of retaining the services of a dog counter every 3 years. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. Do I have a seconder? I have Chris, actually. Questions, comments, or concerns? Quiet, seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. We have no childcare department reports. 7.8, CAO. 7.8.1, potential residential development opportunities. That the council of the township of North Huron hereby okay, so we might have some direction here. So let's have the discussion on 7.8.1 before we get a mover and a seconder. So I'm gonna read it and then we can go on. That the, Wayne's gonna speak to it first too.
So, thanks Ruth. So at the September 23rd regular meeting, council passed the motion and it reads as follows. The council directs staff to investigate all North Huron-owned properties for suitable development purposes. We looked at all of our properties. We own 87 properties, and on those properties, again, we looked at everything. So we looked at existing buildings, parking lots, infrastructure. We looked at our trails, our landfill sites, our cemeteries, our gravel pits, rights of ways, occupied lands. So for example, the trailer park, the floodplain, the parks, and our facilities in terms of our arenas and our ball diamonds. So after we looked at all those properties, we identified 11 that may have potential for development. And it's important to note that we simply looked at them in terms of development potential. In terms of, you know, for example, the town hall property here, unless you're planning to tear it down and rebuild it, we're suggesting this would not be a property that you would put on that list. So, before you is, again, 11 properties that we've identified. So in terms of, there's an identification in terms of the property itself. You'll notice there's a chart there, comments, description a little bit about the property, some things that we noted. And potentially, if you were to decide to proceed to look at this particular property, the estimated number of potential building lots. And that is simply an estimate on our part. And it's important to note that in terms of looking at these properties, it was a paper exercise, using our knowledge, and then in terms of our aerial photos. So if there's a particular property on there that council wants to investigate further, we can certainly do that. We'll do an on-site inspection. You know, we may need to, the one property, for example, has a wood lot on it. You know, we go out and look at the wood lot, and, you know, see whether or not it would remain on the list, so looking for council direction, at this point, just in terms of, are there any properties there in particular the council would like staff to investigate further? We'll certainly do that, and we can bring back a further report.
Go ahead, Kevin.
After your, considering the dam property being nothing that would be done with the structure, would that ever be designated as surplus? Be sold?
The dam? Yeah, any asset the municipality owns could be put on surplus.
I was curious.
Yep.
Just possibly a private ownership.
Yep.
That's,
Go ahead, sorry.
But this list was only talking about properties that we could develop as residential.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only purpose of this report, was for development purposes, pursuit for development purposes. So it didn't look at any other assets we may want to divest ourselves of. That wasn't the intent of this.
Then on the residential side, maybe other things that property can be used for in large, I'm looking at the old fire hall, possibly having other uses for other than residential. I would say that currently is in kind of flux right now as to what could possibly be done on that to.
Down at the end of, I think it's Catherine Street, we have a little 20-foot slim strip in there that's owned by Dave Hodgins owns and he is my brother-in-law, just so everybody knows, and no financial gain here. When I was on council last time, we were going to sell it to him because he cannot build on that. I believe there's 2 lots there because originally it was gonna be a cul-de-sac, so the town owned that little section. Is it on here, we can get rid of it and give it to him and he can sell that lot for somebody?
Yeah, so just in terms of what we did, and going back to Trevor DeGroose's comments, in terms of, we looked at properties with development potential. You know, we did go through an exercise in terms of looking at property that the municipality could dispose of. So, I mean, if council wishes, we can certainly, you know, look at the properties that council could dispose of. What we did here was we looked at properties that we could potentially develop. So they had to be sizable properties, in terms of, to be a residential building lot, for example.
Yeah, Carson's gonna give us some clarity.
Yeah, just to clarify to council where this report came from. So this was Councilor Palmer's notice of motion to direct staff to investigate all of North Huron-owned properties for potential residential development purposes. So that was the scope of this report.
So to fall back on what I just said, if people don't mind, then I'll go to you, Trevor. If we were selling that 20-foot land, you'd put fourplex out there and that would be development. So just, if it needs to be done another time, fine, but I would have a look at that. I'm gonna go to Kevin first, he had his hand up, and then, oh, you did? Sorry, Trevor, you're in line.
So, we also made that motion was also made in a time where influx of the the development above, behind Grandview, I won't call it the name that everybody calls it before, as well as, the discussion about Hutton Heights, the discussion about the Blythe Public School property. There's lots of unknowns in the development sector of what the municipality is looking at. In my opinion, based on what we have on the docket now, and the extension of that potential property behind Grandview and Wingham, as well as Hutton Heights, as well as the Blythe property, or Blythe Public School property, until we have an understanding of what our actual needs are, to go back to further investigate more developmental properties, in my mind, is premature. I think we would be throwing money at something that, one, we don't even know what we need, based on the fact that we have, and the only other potential part would be the stuff, potentially would be in Belgrade, possibly. So, until, I think this council gets through a point in time where those other developments are at a certain point, and we know what the physical need of the rest of the municipality is from a land perspective, it would be my opinion that we take this under information purposes, and if something changes with these other developments, then we now have a list of ones that we can come back to very, very quickly and say, that one looks like we should move forward now because we have other things. Depending on whether these other ideas, like Blythe with the train or the public works shed, and that, those are gonna come up anyways on other discussions throughout the next year or two, I think. It's just a matter of what we do with it. So that's my comment, Reeve. I just think the time we discussed this, or the time when we asked for this, Councilor Palmer and Councilor Reeve, was we were really in an influx of unknown what our development was at that time, because we had so much up in the air. So I think we've got a little more clarity now, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Anita.
Yeah, I'm just talking about this property in Belgrave, Owen Street West. If somebody's interested in that, like for building a house, could they just come to the township and ask if they could buy the lot, or do you have to go to a zoning change, or how does it work?
I don't know, Carson or Dwayne, do you wanna answer that?
So there's a process that we need to undertake to dispose of the property. And then in terms of if somebody wanted to build a house, for example, there would be planning approvals in that particular instance that would be required. So often what will happen is the municipality will sell it, and then the developer or whoever's purchasing it will then undertake to obtain the necessary planning approval. That's not to say council can't do the planning approval and sell it with the planning approvals in place. But sometimes, depending on what developer is proposing, what we've identified here is that the deficient lot size is gonna reduce lot frontage, are two key aspects for that particular property.
Yeah.
But depending on what somebody wants to build on that property, there may be they may wanna reduce the side yard, they may wanna reduce, so it's often best, if, in terms of if you sell it, and then let the developers apply for the plan approval that they need to develop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanna throw out there that, two things we need to do. Number one, we always need to look to the future. And number two, we have a lot on the burner right now, but we're just not too sure how far out that burner is. How hot it is before that burner boils in a lot of cases. To Chris's thoughts on this when he brought this forward, I personally don't see anything wrong with moving forward on this. I don't see where it's gonna be a lot of staff time, but if we got it ready and decided it was not needed by the township, then it's ready for sale. We've done our job, and then we can just sell it. Where if we do it the other way, when we wait for somebody to come and see us, we're just gonna go through all this again. I'm just gonna throw that out there as a thought. Go ahead, Paul, and let's give direction to staff,
Yeah,
okay?
yes, I just appreciate the staff going to the work at doing this. It had to be an undertaking. Like, I'm getting people in town here, they're looking for a place to move to. As they sell their house, they want to downsize, a small thing, and I feel that there's other things going on, but there's potential in the Wingham one here, I feel, with even the trailer park, that, you know, there could be a spot there, right? I feel we should look at it, because we don't know what's gonna happen. Next year, we heard, sure, they could be building, but we don't know that. And I feel with the work that the staff did, have presented this, I feel it's only fair to look at these properties.
Would you like to make that a motion, Paul? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I brought it forward because I'm a firm believer in being prepared. And we were in a flux, like Trevor said, but I think we should have a library of documented of what is potentially for residential or whatever, and commercial. But I think we should, like, you can't just say the Belgrade Ball Diamond, 4 to 6 homes, like, that's kind of, if you don't know the area, that's just not a reality. Like, that one should be struck. Like, I think you should know real quick which ones have potential. Go look at it. Like, you're wasting time if you go look at some of these, in any of the towns. There's some that are just, you don't go there. I'll let you know, the Belgrade Community Center, there is a spot on Highway 4 in Jordan there. There's a house, yellow brick house right beside it. That's not interfering with anything. There's a lot there. It would have to be severed from the center, but there's a potential spot there. And of course, the Owen Street extension. I don't know what the dimension is, but you know why? Yeah, let's divest ourselves of some of these properties because they're not doing us any good. But I think you do need. Sean and Carson, you need some input on some of these properties from those of us that are close to them, and you know what's going on there. But a lot of them are like that trailer park, like Paul said. I think we're all sort of salivating over that potential because you know there's a need for the place for retired folks in town. Anyways, I want us to, with respect to you, Trevor, I want us to have this in our back pocket that we can go to at any time. Somebody comes to us, how about this? We're ready. And let them pay whatever it costs to develop these things, these properties.
Okay, so were you making that a motion that we continue with investigating this? It doesn't mean we're selling it, it still has to come back before us.
Yeah.
Figure out which ones council wants us
Okay.
to investigate further.
Okay, right now? Okay, so as to what you said, and with my colleague beside me here suggesting that let's go through the list right now and decide which ones you want to look at and which ones you don't. So, who's gonna pull the list up? Carson, do you have it? Or it might be easier for, and just name them off and yes or no. Yeah, Dwayne, because you gotta do the.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trevor.
The only comment I would suggest is that if any of these pieces of property are being utilized by the municipality currently for whatever purpose, and there is a report that's going to be coming to council to talk about that piece of property, we need to be understanding of what that means. So I'm using the example of the trailer park. We just had a meeting a week ago with a group of people that said, you know, a report was coming to council about the utilization of the trailer park and so all I'm saying is, if we suggest that is a piece of property that we want staff to move forward, we've now already given suggestion that doesn't matter what the report's gonna come, we've already we've already made our mind up. Therefore, the argument is that you've made your mind up, why did we have the discussion with the Legion last week, or the Legion last week? So, one of the reasons why is it's a great list to have. What I'm saying is, as these things come up, that staff are working on right now, we know, they're working on all the effective utilization of properties in the municipality. As they come up, we take this list and ensure that if that is the right use of that facility or that property, great. If it's not, this list can come back and say, here we go, now let's talk about other uses for it. I just don't I wanna make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we have wasted the time and the effort of staff and given a group like the Legion a false sense of security. And I'm not saying we did or we didn't, but we just had a meeting with them last meeting and said, yeah, we'll give you a year. And now the discussion what I've heard is, well, that's a salivating piece of property, let's talk about it. Well, if we're really gonna talk about it, why would we go after it? So I just wanna make sure council is aware that there is a staff report coming to, that Vicky has mentioned, that is coming to council, that's gonna provide some direction and thoughts about what that piece of property looks like from a staff perspective. Council has their own thoughts. I agree, like, we have our own thoughts and desires about what that piece of property looks like. But I think we need to have council and staff information together to make the proper decision and then take feedback and stuff. So I just think we need to be careful.
So, as to what Trevor said, could I have a motion to table this for further discussion? You do it, Chris?
Yes.
Thank you, Wade. Okay, we're gonna table it, seconded. I have Paul, thank you, all in favor? Carries, thank you. Seven point 8.2 modernization program intake one report. And this is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CEO dated December 2nd, 2019 for information purposes. And further that the Council of Township of North Huron authorizes staff to submit an expression of interest, EOI, for the service delivery review project conducted by a third-party reviewer. Do I have a mover? Actually, I'm gonna get Dwayne to speak to this first, so we're have a clear understanding, but then we'll get moving.
Thanks, Rudy. So back on November 1st, Steve Clark, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, announced a new municipal modernization program. And it's important to note that this funding is in addition to the funding that we received earlier this year. So this is additional funds. The province is making available up to $125 million for 405 small and rural municipalities to conduct new service delivery reviews and to implement the recommendations from those reviews. The review needs to be completed by an independent third party. And in terms of the first intake for this particular program, that draft report needs to be completed in draft form by June 15th of 2019 and need to be posted publicly by June 30th of 2019. So we are working on a tight timeline. But in terms of
2020.
2020, sorry, 2020, sorry.
Really tight.
Yeah. So there's 3 intakes for this particular program. The first intake, the applications are due this Friday, December the 6th. So again, we're working on a tight timeline. In terms of the project itself, staff are recommending that we submit an application to see if we'd be successful in securing funding for it. The indications are that municipalities will receive 100% funding to complete the review, but there's no guarantee. It depends on the number of applications they receive. We have been in contact with our local regional office, and they've indicated that because of the tight timelines, they feel that there is a high likelihood of success that we would get 100% for that. The second intake is planned for this particular program for the spring and summer of 2020, which makes things interesting, just in terms of, at that point, we will be doing potentially our first intake. We'll be doing a service delivery review, and the second intake can be basically, you can apply for funding to implement the recommendations of the first intake. So we've got some overlap there. Announcements regarding the first intake are expected from the ministry in mid-January of 2020, so approximately a month. So we're working on a tight timeline, as I've indicated. So you'll also note in the recommendation, just in the interest of time, that we proceed with issuing a request for proposal to do a service delivery review. which would then, we would be in a position, if we're successful in our funding application, we would bring back the outcome of the request for proposal back to council in terms of awarding the contract to a third party to undertake that review. Depending on the timing, if they announce it mid-January, we'd anticipate that we'd be able to have a report back in front of council, the first council meeting in February. We have reached out to 3 consultants who have undertaken this work, and they've all indicated that for our municipality of our size and the services that we have, they estimate that the cost would be approximately $60,000. They've also indicated that it would take approximately 4 months to complete. So we would be able to complete it within the allotted time frame. Generally, as part of a service delivery review, you do a public consultation. You consult with the public. Given the tight timeline, it's not likely to happen. However, in speaking with the ministry, they indicated that when we make our application, that we include that in our application. If we include it and then we don't get it done, that's better than us making application, then realizing that we could have done it, but then not being approved for the funding. So what's being recommended in terms of the application is that staff are recommending an application of $75,000, $60,000 to do the review itself, $10,000 to undertake public consultation, and then $5,000 as a contingency. Again, the estimates that we received from the consultants were $60,000. They could come in a little bit higher, 65, so we want to have a little bit of buffer around that. The report speaks to what is the service review and why to do that, and I'll maybe leave that, unless there's any questions, I'll leave that for council. If you have any questions about that, certainly have a look at those. It is important to note in terms of the funding program guidelines, with the particular program, there are 3 things though that the program will not fund. In terms of, it will not consider applications that look to identify opportunities for revenue generation or reductions in frontline services. The review does not result in a formal report prepared by a third party. So again, the report has to be prepared by a third party. And the objective of the review extends beyond municipal accountability. So you need to stay within the jurisdiction that you have under Municipal Act. Service delivery reviews are labor intensive in terms of they identify staff with a range of knowledge and expertise and necessary resources to complete the review, which is important to the success of the review itself. Staff are involved in the review process, as are those familiar with the operations of the service and or the program being evaluated. In addition to staff, council certainly is involved in the review. And again, going back to the public consultation, it's ideal that citizens and other stakeholders have a role to play in them as well. But again, given the tight timeline that we're working on, we may not be able to complete the public consultation component within the time frame that we're working. In terms of future considerations, if we apply for the $75,000 but we don't get 100% and we get $60,000, which is 80%, that still will enable us to proceed with the third-party review. So if we apply for 75, we only get a portion, we could still potentially proceed. If we receive less than 80% of what we're applying for, then we would be coming back to council, and if you wish to proceed, then we'd be looking for additional tax dollars to complete the review. But at that point, council can decide whether or not you wish to proceed with review or not. And if you did decide to proceed and we were under the 60,000, that the shortfall would be part of the 2020 budget.
Thank you very much, Wayne. So I'm gonna read the motion now. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive the report from the CAO dated December 2nd, 2019 for information purposes. And further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron authorize staff to submit an expression of interest for the service delivery review project conducted by a third-party reviewer. And further, the council authorizes staff to prepare and issue a request for proposal for a service delivery review. Do I have a mover? I have Rick. Seconder. Anita, questions or comments? Go ahead, Trevor.
Is there any way, I know it says the report can't indicate reduction in services or reduced frontline staff. Is there any way to have that discussion outside of the context of this report? Like to do a frontline service review and not be able to have the documentation about efficiencies, whether it be a reduction in service or whatever, it seems, in my mind, it seems like you're throwing money at to say something is good or bad, but you can't do anything if it's bad. So I know the intention is to protect frontline staff, and I truly believe that, but North Huron is service rich. We've expressed that many times, at least I have. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my concern is that, if the province wants to give us $65,000 to do a service review, and we can't, and I guess the only thing to implement would be efficiencies, I don't know what that looks like. But in my mind, if my real opinion, if we don't get enough money to do this, or if it's not 100% funded, I don't believe it is even worthwhile doing if we can't have the report that says whether it's a service that is really required or not, and that public consultation would be ideal in that discussion. So, I understand that it's important, and I think it truly is important, but the problem is with such a tight timeline and not allowing us to have those information in the report, I think it's really pigeonholing us into having a certain report that I don't know that we can do a whole lot on it anyways.
I'm gonna have Carson speak to that.
So through your worship, so as someone who was at the ministry at the time when this government really pushed for finding efficiencies, a few examples of what this might look like would be still delivering the service, but delivering it in a different way as it's been done in the past. So the municipality might be doing something the way it's always done, and because they're immersed in that, they can't realize that, oh, we could be doing this a different way and it would save us X amount of dollars, X amount of time, right? So that's one way for finding efficiencies and doing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it says you can have a reduction of services, but not so it might tell you that you don't need to be providing all these services. It's just not going to tell you that you should have a reduction in your frontline staff. So there's a difference between those two. So it might say that's a service you no longer need to provide, but it might not. It might say you should be providing that in a different way than you always have been, or you could provide. You don't need to be providing that at all. You might modernize your operations, and that service or something that's being provided is no longer required.
But in saying that, if you gain a level of efficiencies in the idea, if you say, if somebody were to say to you, and I'm gonna look at the public consultation, if you were to say that I'm doing this service and it saves the municipality X amount of dollars, well, the person's gonna say, okay, if that's staff time, what is that staff person doing now under the new efficiency versus not having them at all? And the question is that, the public has a disproportionate belief about what staff do in the municipality. The concern is that and that's the understatement of the understatement. In my opinion is that we have to be clear about what this efficiency is going to do, and if that's the report going to tell us, then great. But most people in the municipality, if you reduce for efficiency, reduce staff, because that's staff time or staff hours, we're going to have to be very clear about what that extra time that is now on that staff, what they're going to be available to do that they're not available to do now. Because that is what the public is going to say. If I don't need that half person, well, why am I doing it? Why do I have them just to have them?
But I think that's I would say that's a conversation for after we have this done. And it's one, and it'll be a difficult conversation, or it may be a conversation we don't have. I hear what you're saying, Trevor, but I think that's a conversation for after the report comes in. Anybody else with questions or comments?
What's the definition of a frontline service? What's that mean? What is frontline service and what isn't frontline service?
I don't know if it spells it out or not, does it?
I don't through your review, I don't recall a definition for frontline service.
Would
But-
ask.
But again, this is not something we're making a decision on tonight, and if we don't have the money, we don't have to go ahead with it. We're just requesting it, and if it says this is frontline, or as Trevor has spoken to, this and this and this, we just walk away. All we're suggesting is this isn't made available, it's a quick turnover, which this government seems to be doing a lot of, which is kind of unique, because everybody used to complain about the years it takes to get, and now we're saying this is fast. So I would strongly suggest that we apply for this. I think it's a good thing. And when we get it in front of council, again, we can have a good vibrant conversation over it, again, on the merits of going forward with it. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Paul.
I just wonder if Carson could just give an example, when you said, the efficiencies of something, I'm just curious, is it with the website or?
Yep, so through your worship, so a lot of that might look like modernizing your operations, right? And so from a staff perspective, applying for this first intake would be good for us, because one, it'll identify where you can improve and modernize your operations, and then you have the second and third intake to apply for, to hopefully get some more free money to carry out those recommendations, right? So then you're able to, the first intake, you've identified where you can modernize, be it a website or be it the way you do payroll or something like that, right? And then in the second and third intake, you receive the funds to actually implement ways to make those efficiencies a reality.
Okay. Other questions or comments or concerns? I do not have a mover yet, so I'm going to now read. Oh, I do?
Yep.
Oh, take that off. I'm going to call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. We don't have any correspondence tonight. Council reports. Does anybody want to report anything from council? Well, I'm going to do my activity report first. Well, I'm going to touch on a few things. There are four of us that were over at the HMA Awards, the Huron Manufacturing Association Awards, and North Huron bonused on that one for those of us that were there. And for those of us, you that weren't, I want you to let you know that the Innovation Manufacturing Award went to Biax here in Wingham. The Exporting Award went to Brightspan here in Wingham, North Huron, forgive me. And the Green Leader Award went to Gemstone Essence here in North Huron too, and it's a shop on the main street. And it just tells you that manufacturing here is alive and well. Today marks the first meeting of our second year. We have gone through a year already. A couple of you guys through the last 3 or 4 months asked me if I was making out with a list of things I wanted to do when I got elected. So I'm gonna repeat the list, and then I'm gonna go from there on some information for you. So when I was elected, with the thoughts of tax dollar spending with negative results, increased financial responsibility. We have lack of industrial growth, lack of home building lots in North Huron, spending tax dollars for other municipalities, growth with no direct financial support for North Huron, proper research and communication with council, public, and staff when challenging decisions are made. I think we've covered that off in our very first year, not that we're going to slack off. We actually achieved 93 goals. And I'm not going to go through all 93, but I'm going to highlight a few of them for our staff just to reflect back on. First one would be the renewal of the fire agreement with Central Huron and Morris Charber. ACW is gonna be done this year. Another good one is the new Public Works Fire Hall building, continuing to work with PW manager Sean McGee on this project. We have the A2A development, sorry, I forgot to put down the proper terminology. We have a new development here in Wingham, looking really good. We've moved forward on the Hutton Heights development, the former Blythe School development, and we've signed agreements with the Blythe Festival. A few other things, standardizing water rates across the township. We have the Highway 486 development on the edge of Wingham. We have the Kerr Drive development between Tim Hortons and West Cass. They're talking about that little development in there. We have the In It to Win It, very successful for all of us. We have the compactor purchase, which was quite unannounced, but quickly happened. We took care of that. The Moncrief Road reconstruction, the Curry line to Scott line, road allowance clearance on Marnock line to Curry line. Stockpiling the topsoil claim for construction projects. Just want to explain that one a bit. So what was happening before is whenever anybody was digging out, they were taking the land away. We've decided now we're taking it out to the landfill, so we're not paying for fill to cover the garbage up. We're actually taking stuff where we're digging holes and putting it out there, which is a very good idea. The North Street East Road reconstruction and paving, linking to Rutledge subdivision. The Blythe Fire Hall and Public Works Garage site selection and prep and the ongoing construction there. The Blythe Trail Bridge reconstruction. We do fix bridges. The Blythe plow truck replacement, including getting rid of the old one. Fees and charges review at the North Huron for North Huron. Summit Drive street light has been done. The project purchase and operation of the North Huron owned line painting machine, saving us money. Park Drive and Center Street asphalt paving. We have display ongoing in the council chambers here so that everyone can see what we're talking about and what we're reading about on our little computers. We also have a committee of adjustment terms of reference. We appointed the House and Dam Committee. We have appointed a council representative to the North Huron Museum Committee, traffic bylaw amendments, CIP intakes 1 and 2. And like I said, I'm not going to do all 93, I'm just going to touch a few of them. The evaluation of the strategic plan is very important. Animal control bylaw, live streaming technology operations we're working on. We have occupational health and safety policy we've done. Entered into 2 new lease agreements with the Knights, or a new lease agreement with the Knights of Columbus, successfully implemented fitness programs in Blythe and Belgrade. Established a museum advisory committee. We're able to provide the same level of support to all of our annual special events in the community and supported new events like the KAO's ball tournament and the Rutledge Rutabaga Festival. Installed new access doors on the ice surface in Blythe, provided easier access for volunteers at the half ice boards. We have all staff has been trained for health. Actually, all staff that have been off for health reasons are all back. All of our untrained staff are now currently working on their apprenticeships to take district education for early childhood learning. Working on water and sewers. We have our asset management. We actually have a designate to take my place should anything happen to me. We have Trevor as the legal designate, just in case I get impeached or something like that. So we're covered off at the county too, you guys. We're working on cross-border agreements. We're working with local employers to help establish the problems they're having. These are outside the realm of what we need to do, but our staff is doing this. We're working with the building relationships with the newcomers in town. Again, our staff is working on this. You know, there's so much going on, but the best part of all are the volunteers. Our volunteers, whether it's for the theater above our heads, whether it's the Santa Claus parades, the parks, whether it's the beautification of the walkways, the main streets, the BIAs, the Economic Development Board members, the labor shortage participants. It's just amazing how much people are stepping forward to help us. We have done a lot, but we're not gonna stop. Next year, we're gonna dream bigger, we're gonna shine brighter, we're gonna embrace challenges. Oh yeah, we're gonna take the training wheels off now. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the council now. Council member reports, verbal or written updates for members who are sitting on boards or committees. Anybody would like to speak up? Paul? And Nita's gonna go next.
So Paul goes first.
Okay, I'll go first, okay. Yes, at the Huron Manufacturers, it was a good night. I knew I saw that lady that was on getting her award before. I didn't realize, I look at her when she's in her office, right across from the post office, like, or her shop. Man, I should know that place, but Trevor told me where she was, and so I went and congratulated her. I felt terrible. But, and today I went to Biax and talked to Mr. Harrell. He had a display there. And I hate to say this, but Biax, yeah, I just didn't realize what they're doing in that house or in that big factory up there. And he gave me a tour of it today, and it's unbelievable. And they want to, they send a pile of stuff to China, and he said it's just wonderful here. It's a real plus, and we heard that in his report, how well they liked it in North Huron, and it was good, so things are going well.
Thank you, Paul. Anita?
Visitors Recruitment Committee had their Doctors Appreciation Month. Went very well. All the doctors were there, very appreciative of Jan, who is the recruiter. Yeah, it was a good meeting. They are doing their Effie Medill Red Seal students who are coming in Wednesday to have some education about jobs in healthcare. And that was it for that. Then I had the Maidens Valley meeting. They are looking at a general levy increase, and that will be about $1,500 to $3,500 a year for us over this. So we have to decide about that in our vision meetings.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone want to talk about the parade Monday, or the one coming up in Blythe? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, we participated in the parade in Wingham on Saturday. I would suggest it was probably a lot better than it would have been if it was on Sunday. It was actually, very well attended, I would say. It's hard to really get an idea of how many people, because they seem to be condensed in a certain small areas all the way down, but Paul was a little tired halfway through, so we had to make sure he got all the way to the other end. But it was, I truly do appreciate, what the Lions Club does for that parade. Number of hours that is put in order to ensure that runs relatively smoothly with the number of folks that is there. I think they need to be commended for the effort that they put in, as well as the volunteers that support them on that. So, and then the other thing, I think there's another ratepayer in town. I'm probably gonna get this wrong. Al Harrison he was elected to the Softball Ontario, either Softball Ontario or Softball Canada. I will find out what that one. It's one of them. He was elected to the Hall of Fame. Al Harrison has been the biggest promoter of softball next to Doug Neal within the township of North Huron and Wingham residents for pretty much their entire life, at least the entire my life anyways. So, I think that's definitely an accomplishment to be had. So, I have a couple of requests, and I'll use it as this, but then it's more for the part for the Huron Manufacturers, as well as Al Harrison, and as the Legion, is that this council sends letters of appreciation or congratulations to those members of the Huron Manufacturers Association within the, relatively within the town limits of the North Huron. I would include Brightspan in that, as the fact that they are our neighbor and a close manufacturer of us, as well as Al Harrison and the Lions Club. in appreciation for their successes, during the last, few weeks. So, I would hope that the council would support me in that motion.
And I'll have that too.
Yeah, I'll get to staff exactly what he was, I'm sure it was Sapo Ontario, and I will make sure that I get that, but he was elected to a Hall of Fame.
So I have a motion on the floor, do I have a seconder? I have Anita, questions or comments? None, all in favor? Carries. Anyone else like to speak about their activities? Go ahead, first Chris and then Anita.
Just about the parade, it was a joy, being involved. I have to thank Chad for letting me ride in one of the fire trucks. As long as I didn't touch anything, I was okay. And I have to say, I apologize to Paul, I drove right past him, I didn't realize how pooped he was. Anyway, he phoned me up later and gave me a text, so.
Anita?
I went to the UMatter event in Clinton. It was an event for students from grade 7 to 12 to talk about mental health and all kinds of leadership, community sport, well-being. And I went to the evening. The event was organized by Community Partners, Rural Response for Healthy Children in the Evermaiden District School Board. I went to the evening event. There was a speaker, Fahd Al-Hattab, and it was Mindful Mike. He did about meditation. It was a lot about how to build resiliency, about encouragement, creativity, and embracing failure. One of the posters they had on the wall was the logo of the Midland School Board. It's the tree with all the leaves, and all the students could put up leaves and what mattered most in their lives. And it was very encouraging to see, like, it was friends, family, and community. So I think as a municipality that the thing that community is so at the third place of their really would like to see that. It's really encouraging for us that we have to work towards that. And I think it's also important for the community and safety and well-being plan that we include our students and that it's recognized that their community is important. In November, also the Children and Youth Charter of Rights of Huron and Perth was established, and one of their expressed rights was also belonging within their community. So I think we have a big role to play as a council to make that a true thing for the community.
Thank you very much. Did I see a hand over here? Kevin?
I'll take that offer up of mentioning the Blythe, the Christmas parade.
Well, I thought you were gonna say Paul was tired now.
It's a shorter parade.
Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Just like to invite the councilors to participate. And Rick, it's at 11 o'clock. This Saturday. It's looking to be a fairly full parade as much as the Wingham one. I would also like to say that I enjoyed the Wingham one. I was surprised. I didn't know there was that many children in town.
You'll have as many in Blythe, trust me. I look forward to that too. We all do. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Comments by members? Request from Councilor Van Hitterman. So I'm going to read this, but it's not for discussion. We're going to bring it forward, I believe, at the next meeting, if I understand this right. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby appoint Councilor Anita Van Hitterman as a second council representative to the North Huron Economic Development Committee. And further that Reed Bailey be moved to ex officio status. And further that the 25-2019 committee appointment bylaw be amended to reflect this appointment. Do I have a mover?
You don't.
Oh, I don't need a mover, because it's coming on.
So it's just there to notify that it would be brought forward.
Yeah, I do apologize. You've told me that enough times and I asked anyway. Bylaw. Bylaw 11.1 is not going to be read tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, a bylaw to adopt water and wastewater financial plans. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Question, all in favor? Carries. Announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, December 16, 2019 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Council chambers. The next Economic Development Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, December 12th, 2019 at 8 a.m. at the Wingham Center for Employment and Learning. The next North Huron Police Services Board meeting will be held on Tuesday, December 17th, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the North Huron Council chambers. The next Housing Dam Committee meeting will be held on Wednesday, December 18th at 4 p.m. on the North Huron Council chambers. The next North Huron Museum Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, December 19th at 2 p.m. at the North Huron Council chambers here. Other business? Seeing none. There is no closed session tonight. Confirmation of the bylaw. 15.1. Bylaw number 114-2019 being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with at the Council of the Township of North Huron at the December 2nd, 2019 meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Trev. Do I have a seconder? I have Chris. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council Township of North Huron agrees there being no further business before council, meeting hereby adjourns at 8:25. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and Paul. All in favor? Get ease. Let her done. Thank you.